Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is Bryndis and in today's video we're gonna be talking about Dubliners by James Joyce. So Dubliners is a short story collection of 15 short stories that take place in Dublin in Ireland at the turn of the 20th century. It was published in 1914, and it's about these kind of middle-class characters who are experiencing some disheartening things, for sure. The author of this book of these short stories is James Joyce, who was an Irish writer and author of just the magnificent caliber. He was a novelist and a poet as well. So he was born in 1882 and died in 1941. And he is, I believe, considered to be one of the most influential and important writers of the 20th century. His novel Ulysses, which was published in 1922, is just like one of those few absolute masterpieces that are just the greatest literature pieces of all time, basically. I have not read Ulysses. It is on my list for sure, but I haven't gotten to it yet. So other novels by him are A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, which was published in 1916, and Finnegan's Wake, which was published in 1939. So he published some really phenomenal novels. And these short stories that are, are in this collection of Dubliners definitely depicts his writing to a degree, but yeah, he only got better, which is saying a lot, because this is magnificent and just phenomenal piece of writing. There has been a lot of literary critique on the Dubliners. If you look it up, you can find like all these discussions on the different themes of the different writing style and writing techniques, how the themes in this book, or how the stories connect to the political issues in Ireland at the time. With the battle for independence being like in high gear in a way. So, and they say that the critiques that I kind of checked out after I read the book, talking about the main theme of Dubliners being paralysis. Yep, which is kind of his critique, is Joyce's critiquing of Irish society, which he thought was kind of paralyzed with these different sources, like Irish nationalism, or like the impact, or the fight for home rule, and then the Catholic Church obviously being super strong in Ireland, and then the British rule and the kind of the Anglo-Irish class of people living in Ireland, and all of these three kind of issues came to a head, and he is saying that it kind of paralyzed Ireland or the society, and nobody, like, they couldn't get anywhere. So that was really interesting. I'm not qualified to really talk about that type of those issues. I mean, I do know quite a lot about the fight for independence in Ireland, the Easter Rising and the subsequent division of Ireland into the Republic and then Northern Ireland. Just something that I've read as just something that I've been interested in, as well as just things that I've learned through reading fiction and watching movies and TV shows and stuff like that. So I don't have the qualifications to actually necessarily critique this book as a literary critic, because I'm not a literary critic. I'm critiquing this book simply on the merits of, or on the criteria that how I liked it, basically. So that's the type of a critique that this video is offering. It's my thoughts, my opinions, my review, and why I absolutely loved every single short story in this collection. And I'm gonna talk about 3 of them, but I really just absolutely loved them. And I think I said that in my April wrap-up video, that the only thing that I didn't like about this collection is that the stories are so short. I really would have liked a novel from each one of them, because I felt all of them were quite interesting and kind of connected with me. So yeah, that's the only downside to this collection of short stories. It's really well written. It depicts life and kind of situations, and it's just so good. I mean, it's so miserable and dreary, but it's done in such a way that it's just so good. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about 3 of my favorite short stories in this collection of 15. Cat drama. And yeah, let's just get into the short stories. The first story that I want to talk about in this collection is the first one, and it is called The Sisters. It is, I don't know how long it is, 17 pages, so very short, but this is when I started reading this book, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And then the first story, and I'll talk about it as well in my April wrap-up, it was like being kicked in the head by a horse. It just like, whoa. It was so impactful and good. So it tells the story of a young boy, and it is kind of describing the aftermath of a death of a priest. And it's like, so a family friend comes to visit the family of this young boy, and he's telling them that he's dead and things like that. And so this young boy, who was very close to the priest, hears some less than flattering stories about the priest. So when I read this story first, was like, I was immediately thinking that priest had not been very nice to boys. And maybe that's just me colored by the fact that there have been so many horrendous stories coming from the abuse of Catholic priests of children in their and kind of their parishes. So maybe that's why I immediately went there. In reading the review of this story in Aftermath, nobody seems to be like talking about that per se. So maybe I'm mistaken, but that was definitely the feeling that I had, that the boy was just so relieved that he was dead, because then he wouldn't be messing with him anymore. But maybe he was so relieved that he was dead because the priest was teaching him about Catholicism and he didn't want to be a priest. Like the priest was kind of somehow grooming the boy to becoming a Catholic priest as well. Grooming is a very horrible word to use for that, I know, but maybe it's like sowing the seeds of interest into the boy's heart that he might also want to become a priest. Anyway, so, but I don't know, that is just like on page 12, the boy, I found it strange that neither I nor the day seemed in a mourning mood, and I felt even annoyed at discovering in myself a sensation of freedom as if I had been freed from something by his death. So maybe that, I don't know. The undertone for me is that he's freed from this monster. Maybe that's not what was happening, but there's also another, like this family friends comes to the house and is saying like, old, you know. So the boy's aunt says, no, the boy's uncle says the youngster and he were great friends. The old chap taught him a great deal, mind you, and they say he had a great wish for him, which could be that, you know, he wanted him to become a priest. And then the aunt says, God have mercy on his soul. And then old Cotter looked at me for a while. I felt that his little beady black eyes were examining me, but I would not satisfy him by looking up from my plate. He returned to his pipe and finally spat rudely into the grate. I wouldn't like children of mine, he said, to have too much to say to a man like that. I don't know. Yeah, this, I just really, I mean, it's, what did I say, 17 pages? No. Yeah, 17 pages. And it just like, it's so good. It is so good. The second story in Dubliners that I really, really liked was Evelyn. And this is a super short story. It's called Evelyn. It's 5 pages. And you would not think that you can get a lot said in 5 pages. But it's basically like a poem, really. It's so well, you just get the gist of the story, like it's so intense. So this story is about Evelyn, who is a teenage girl at around, I think 19 probably. And so she falls in love with this man who is, I think, a sailor. And she's planning to leave him and to go from Dublin to Buenos Aires in Argentina. And so in this story, there's definitely like themes of domestic violence, grief, loss, sadness, and stuff like that. And I mean, when she's like thinking about her life with living with, so her mother has passed away and her brothers have moved away. So she is foreseeing her life living alone with her father, who was quite violent. So here is like a section that I thought was just like, whoa. She stood up in a sudden impulse of terror. Escape! She must escape. Frank would save her. He would give her life, perhaps love too. But she wanted to live. Why would she be unhappy? She had a right to happiness. Frank would take her in his arm, fold her in his arm. He would save her. So this is what she was thinking about wanting to go with Frank, her lover, or not like physical lover, but romantic lover. But she's battling her inner sense of duty to her father and to her family, and the promise that she had made to her mother that she would take care of things, take care of the home after the mother had passed away. And this story is, a story of, I feel like it's a story of hope dying. She is, I think, both afraid of the unknown, of going somewhere with this man to a different place, but also afraid what will happen if she doesn't keep her promise to her mother. And here is just this one. No, it was impossible. Her hands clutched the iron in frenzy. Amid the seas, she sent a cry of anguish. And it's very interesting, because a lot of, if you just kind of read it very coldly, it's very over the top. But when you're he just creates this atmosphere within the story that you are just just like with the first story, you're just sucked in, and it's just, oh my God. So when I was reading the reviews for this story, there was definitely some things that I didn't realize, like, for example, that going to Buenos Aires was a euphemism for going into prostitution. And that there is like, that Frank, there is the probability that Frank wasn't actually going to marry her. He was going to take her. They were going on a ship, I think, to Liverpool. And then from Liverpool, they would go to Argentina. But he was just probably going to get his way with her and then leave her in Liverpool. And so there are all of those undertones that I didn't know when I read it the first time. But, whoa, this story is just so good. So the last story that I want to talk about is A Painful Case. It is 11 pages, and that's it. Oh my God, it broke me. A trigger warning is that it does deal with suicide, and I think that might be one of the reasons for why it's so compelling to me, because I have lost a loved one to suicide, but it was, I don't know if you can say that something is triggering is in a good way, but it definitely impacted me extremely hard because of my experience, and just the tone of utter like despair that both the person that would take their own life would experience, but also for the people who are left behind. So it's a very, very difficult read, I think, especially if you have that experience. But I think that it's Joyce is just, I don't even have words. He is so good. But so the story is about Mr. Duffy, who is a middle-aged man living in Dublin, obviously. He's very clean and detailed and like meticulous about everything being. He sounds like he's either has OCD or autism. Like he's like very particular about things, and not very social at all. And then he meets Mrs. Emily Sinico, yes, who is a married woman, not necessarily very happily, and they start this really lovely platonic relationship, and they meet on the regular, and I think in a park somewhere. I think they met first in the movies, or in not movies, the theater, and then they will meet at the concert, and then they will meet regularly and just to talk. And one day, Mrs. Simiko makes a gesture, like touches his cheek, I think, which has the intimacy, which indicates that perhaps her feelings are not platonic anymore. And he is just freaked out by it. He rejects her and just refuses to meet her again. 4 years later, he reads a obituary or a news report stating that she has passed away and that she has basically walked in front of a train or something like that. So she's taken her own life. And there is an interview with her husband, with saying that about 4 years ago, or I don't remember, two years ago maybe, that she had started drinking quite heavily, and that she had, been, they've been trying to find help for her, but nothing had worked. And so at first Mr. Duffy is disgusted at her, like for her having done such a thing. Suicide is obviously a very, taboo and not something you were not supposed to do, basically. And it was very, like, people were would be very judgmental of people who would take their own life. And thankfully that has changed a lot, today. And so first he's very judgmental, like the weak woman, stuff like that. But then he slowly starts to connect his rejection of her to what she did and how her situation in life that made her so miserable and unhappy that she saw no other way out of that. And then when he realizes as well that he has now he has no one. He is completely alone. And the way Joyce writes this is, when I read this, I cried and I cried and I cried. And when I was writing this, my review, my little script here, I cried and I cried again, because it just goes into your gut. The lonely, he describes this extreme sense of loneliness. It is, let me see here. Here is one section. He walked through the bleak alleys where they had walked 4 years before. She seemed to be near him in the darkness. At moments, he seemed to feel her voice touch his ear, her hand touch his. He stood still to listen. Why had he withheld life from her? Why had he sentenced her to death? He felt his moral nature falling to pieces. This is heart-wrenching. I feel like that passage really depicts in such an intense way his loss, his feelings of grief, but also this intense feeling of guilt that is something that, if you've lost someone to suicide, is just something that you will always have to kind of deal with. And then there is the last kind of couple of sentences in the story are, he could not feel her near him in the darkness, nor her voice touch his ear. He waited for some minutes, listening. He could hear nothing. The night was perfectly silent. He listened again. Perfectly silent. He felt that he was alone. It is, oh my God, it is heartbreaking. For me, so all of the 15 stories were really good and interesting, and they kept me went into my soul, basically. They are all so miserable, and I really enjoyed that, which is so weird. But it's definitely not something you're gonna read if you just want fluffy stories and happy endings, because there are no happy endings in this book, for sure. Or, maybe there are, because we don't know. They should have been longer, so we would have really known. But anyway, Joyce's writing is so good, and he's obviously a master of the craft, and I'm really excited to read more of his work. I own Ulysses, but I think I might probably start with a portrait of an artist as a young man, and then Finnegan's Wake before I go into Ulysses, because I'm very intimidated by it, I will not lie. But I recommend you reading Dubliners. If you're able to read something that is going to really be challenging and heart-wrenching. And even though it was really hard for me to read, especially the last story that I talked about, A Painful Case, I feel that it's actually a really good way to heal as well, to read something that is so hard and horrible, really. So yeah, it's just 5 stars all around, and it's one of the best things that I've read in my entire life. And I'm like, it feels like a hyperbole, but it's not. It's just, it really is phenomenally good. It was so good and so hard, difficult, miserable, but so good. I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. If you've read Dubliners, let me know in the comments. And also if this little review of mine made you want to read it or made you even more afraid to read it, let me know as well. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.